right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're listening to us. We're just grateful that you're here. I'm here with Tanner Ahoy. My name is Parker Wyatt, and welcome to another episode of Big Bear Theory. So, if y'all don't know, it's absolutely freezing outside. I think we're experiencing single-digit weathers in Texas. And then Tanner, I was in Indianapolis this weekend, and I got to experience for the first time negative degree weather. So one of the days that I was there, It was -2 degrees.
Yeah. Well, and you probably came home and you were like, "Oh, I'm coming back to Texas."
Honestly, it was so sad.
And then you get here and it's 8 degrees.
Yeah, that 22 degrees was warm.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still cold, but it wasn't. I think it was Saturday. It was -2 when we walked out, and the wind chill was -20. And we walked out, and everything on our body just froze. We were coughing. It was our nose hairs were frozen. It was the crazy experience. My hands were agony for in minutes.
And you see the weather over there like that, and people that live there are like, "Oh, this is normal."
Yeah.
They're fine with it.
And they were just.
And then Texas, it's it goes to 20 degrees in Texas. It doesn't even have to snow, and people are at Walmart buying up all the stock and preparing for Armageddon.
Dude.
You know?
And it's funny because so people in Indianapolis actually know that Texas is like that. So they're getting news recordings, and all the HEBs are apparently out of stock of all the things.
That's
and
funny.
So it was funny to see that Texas is at least well renowned of how kind of, I guess, weak we are when it comes to the cold. Because they're sending news stuff up here. They were talking, I was watching the news, and they're talking about Tyler, Texas, being one of the places that got hit. And they were describing Indianapolis, and they were just yeah, it's cold, pretty great storm. But they were just really talking more about the storm. And then gets to the guy in Tyler, Texas, and it looks the exact same. There really wasn't a lot of snowfall between at least Tyler, Texas, and where I was in Indianapolis. And the guy was absolutely do not drive unless you absolutely have to. Extremely unsafe. You won't make it, essentially. And I was just kind of laughing because these people, I mean, there are people lowering it. I mean, you're exhaust pipes going throughout the whole day, just completely unconcerned about the weather. And then you have us Texas, just we're gonna die.
Yep. Hey, but in the summer, it's people can't deal with the heat like we do.
That is true.
People are "Oh, 90 is so hot." I'm okay, try 107.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
try 107 in the sun.
They don't even know. They really don't. Yeah. So we have our pros and cons, but it was funny every time we told people we were from Texas, and they were like, "Oh, you must be hating your lives right now." And I was like, yes, we are. But then they get 80, like you said, 80, maybe 90 degree weather, and we're over here in 105, it's nothing. So tomato, I guess.
Yep.
So for those who don't know, I was in Indianapolis. I was doing a new instructor course for something other than right cross, just to see what it was like and how we experienced it and things like that. And got me thinking. It was the first time in a while that I got to do something new and try to, push through that. And I figured this would be kind of the great topic to start is, what is it like to try something new? Because one thing I've noticed, I don't know if you know this, Tanner, but I feel like a lot of people are struggling to try new things nowadays versus in the past. So I'm not sure, what do you think is that perspective of maybe why people aren't willing or wanting to try new things?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a lot of the times it's a fear of failure, right? Before even trying something. And the perspective that I have on it is if you go into anything, regardless of if you're comfortable with it or good at it or bad at it, if you're going into it with the idea that you're gonna fail, you're probably gonna fail. And like, I am personally, I'm more of like a glass half full type person. So like, kind of having that perspective is just like natural to me, and it comes organic to me. But some people, like we talked about it last time, like some people learn differently. Like some people have different uh, approaches with this. So like, I think that it's most of the time when I see it, and like I saw it a lot last summer with like guards who like they weren't as comfortable with like their CPR or lifeguarding skills. Like they were more scared to fail rather than ready to actually learn and like get better. Because like the only way that you're ever going to get better, like the first step to it in my eyes, is like accepting that you're not perfect in that, or like accepting that you're not like adequate in that. I don't want to say perfect, you know, because perfect is so
Right.
hard to
Yeah.
achieve. But it's like, if you're like, that's the best way to get better at something, is like kind of realizing that you need to get better at it first. And that sounds, you know, obvious and basic, but it's like an easy step to overlook. I mean, I've done it in my life, and I've, like I said, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I saw it last summer too.
Yeah. And it's funny. I don't know if funny is the right word because I don't want to like insult anybody here, but the fear of failure, right? And I even looked this up. I you should be proud. I prepped myself a little bit, and I'll read some of the things that I found online through some articles and things like that. Fear of failure being a big thing, and we'll try and I'll kind of show you essentially where this fear of failure comes from. And to me, it made a little bit more sense to where we are right now. But it is funny that it feels more comforting to never do something knowing you won't fail than it is to try something and fail, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like, how does one change that mentality, that acceptance of failure, and that it is okay? Because if we don't, we essentially kind of confine ourselves to the box, right? So let me pull up these articles. I took a couple screenshots. Let's see here. So one of them, I literally just searched like, why are people afraid of trying new things, and found one article. Nothing. It's called what, Unfold and Begin. So some website, it was like the first thing to pop into Google, and then I think I found more of like an organization or an EDU article, so a little bit more in depth. But this one I thought trapped it really, really well, which was, we're afraid to try new things because of fear of the unknown or fear of failure, just like we said. We also tend to overthink things by comparing the cost. And I think cost is not just money, but just the sacrifice that we have to make, either mentally, or
Right.
emotionally, things like that.
It could be money,
Could be money,
but it's like
exactly.
everything. Yeah.
But I don't,
Yeah.
it's definitely more than that for sure. And then we tend to
Yeah.
amplify against the benefits, which we tend to minify, basically saying, we basically say the cost of trying is far too much versus the benefit we're going to get out of it. So why bother trying in the first place? And if you never try new things, you'll never know what you can do or learn, which is the huge summary. So I'm going to use like this whole paragraph as a summary of what we're going to kind of talk about. But then this website, I think it's called University of the People. It was a .edu, so I feel a little bit power on this. But so we'll see. I'm trying to use like some credible resources just so people don't kind of like
Yeah.
rat on me here.
No, yeah, EDU.
Yeah,
That's scholarly.
it's like research paper 101. It's what my AP teacher said, is like, if it doesn't have edu or org at the end of it, don't use it. So this is me
Don't use
using my
it.
edu.
Yeah.
And here's the last little bit. So everyone experiences their own level of fear of change. That's why comfort zones exist. You're not alone in these feelings surrounding change. In fact, neuroscience has shown that uncertainty feels similar to failure in our brains, which is the most wild part.
Mm.
So uncertainty feels similar to failure in our brains. And that was my key, like, yes, this is what we need to show people. They're so afraid of failure, but at the same exact time, being uncertain is equal to failure. So now we're failing either way at this point. And now the only way to conquer failure is to actually try. And so this is what I want to try and push to everyone listening today is how do we break the uncertainty chain so that we can see that even if we do fail, we at least fail through trying, which is essentially learning, not failing. And that's how we can expand and learn and open up our box, right? So, how do we do that? So, we're going to use a couple of examples. I'm going to use this podcast, right? This is literally episode 2 of our podcast. And how did we get here? How did we start doing it? And I feel like the first one really went well, but the odds of that happening were pretty rare. I think we got, but I would say going with this method that we'll talk about, I think that's really why it got us to where it was. You know, we didn't say, okay, let's start a podcast 30 minutes later, throw up the PC, throw up the MacBook, and let's see what happens. It took us like 2 months, I think, to maybe probably get this going.
Yeah.
So
to finally from birth of the idea to actually recording the first podcast, it was probably 2 months.
Yeah. And so, and even to go further back into that, I wanted to start a podcast like last year. I just didn't really have the, I didn't really go past, it looks like step 3. So once I got to step 3, I stopped. And I think step 4 is what you secured for me. We'll talk about step 4 in a second. But you really, what I'm trying to kind of say here is, in order to successfully try something new and feel like you gave it your all and that you didn't fail, is you have to go through all of these steps. If you start short of one, you're kind of cheating yourself of trying something new. And that is going to be hard as we kind of progress and as we push forward. But I think these steps are simple enough and you can kind of take it as, okay, let me do step 1 and then let me do step 2. And we kind of get to the end of the finish line a lot easier than should we try to do this all at once, right? Should we say, hey, let's start a podcast, and should we start one that day? I feel like that's where people kind of set themselves up for failure. So we're going to start with research. That's step 1, research. And so for the podcast, the biggest thing that we did, and this is what I love about modern day, is you can Google or YouTube pretty much anything. And so I Googled literally how to start a podcast, and I watched probably 3, 4, maybe 5 different videos how to start a podcast. And what I did was I found the repeatable things. Like, what do people continuously emphasize? Because some people were like, you need to get a microphone. Some people were like, you need to get a webcam. Some people were like, you need to find how to publish it, right? And then it was all these different things from the first video. And in the second video, it had different things. They're like, oh, you need a mixer, or they emphasized a microphone. You know, some people emphasized the podcast recording system that you used. And then the others was like, oh, you just need software, right? And so as I went through these things, the main repeatable things after I watched 3 of the 5 videos, or as I watched 3 to 5 of these videos, I can't remember how many I watched. It was microphone's key. You really want like a good microphone just to kind of get you set up. And there's some softwares that you can download that'll help make that microphone sound better. Or if you don't have the ability to buy a microphone at this time, there's still ways to improve your sound with whatever sound you got. But you definitely need that. And then you need to decide if you were going to do kind of a 1-person or 2-person podcast. And they really said anything outside of 1 or 2 people was, or excuse me, anything out of 2 people, it gets really crowded. Like the audio gets crowded. There's just too many voices to kind of listen to. Not that you can't. And there have been podcasts that I've heard where they have 2 main people and they do a guest, but it's not their primary, right? And then the publishing of the podcast, that's pretty much all you need. And then it talked a little bit about whether you do video, whether you do audio only, and things like that. But those were the main things that I took from it. And so those were the main things that I got. And then there's all sorts of free things that help with that. So like our software, all the software that we got was minimum, I mean, $0. I think the only thing that costs is just the recording of how we're doing it. The microphone, obviously a little bit pricey, or a decent microphone. The camera really wasn't terrible. But we figured out the full
But
cost.
when you say pricey, it's like, it's not like breaking the bank.
Yeah, it's not breaking the bank.
Right?
It's just like, it's enough to dedicate. I need to probably push through this, which is sometimes maybe even a good tip as we go down to tips, is maybe you need to kind of force yourself by making a commitment, maybe like a financial commitment, because when you pay for something, I don't know about you, but my mindset is I'm using every cent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different. No, for sure. Yeah.
So
there's not a single pack of ramen noodles that goes to waste.
Oh, exactly.
Sauce,
even if I hate whatever I'm doing, like I'm doing it until that was worth whatever it was. So, so that may be
and
something
I think that
helpful.
a lot of people who watch this will resonate with that. Like, I think a lot of people have the same, like, frugal, like, idea on money, being like, okay, whatever I buy, like, I'm using it. So yeah, that's a really good idea.
So there's our first pro tip as you go through is invest into it, and now you're more likely to want to do that. And maybe it's not like 100%, but at least it's going to further intensify, like, I need to keep moving forward because I've already put like an investment into this. And you have a good example that I wanted to kind of talk about, because you technically started working with us as a delivery driver, right? But that was the job, take this, move it here. And that was really easy for you to roll into, right? Because it was just like one of those jobs that you could do it. You knew when your start of the day was, you knew when your end of the day was, and that was that. But then the next year, you turned to a supervisor and you had to run the operations of a lifeguarding company for like 20 something pools, something like that. And
I think it was, yeah.
It was a lot. And you've never lifeguarded before. In fact, you got your certification, April? So 1 month before the pools open?
Yes. I started working as a supervisor technically before I even had my lifeguard certification. Now, obviously we didn't have like pools going, right? So it was fine. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, I worked last summer, or 2 summers ago, as the delivery guy. And I was not in a position of leadership at all. I tried to, be a leader as much as I could be, but when you're in that position, like, your interactions are very much just like, hey, how's your day going? Here's the stuff that you need. Okay, have a great day. So it was very hands off, as opposed to this past summer when I was a supervisor. But it was like nerve wracking. I mean, for sure, like, going into it, because I hadn't sat a single minute on stand. I didn't know a single thing about lifeguarding. I knew, like, very minimal about CPR because I had to get it at like previous jobs and stuff, but very minimal. And that wasn't even the more like scary thing for me. The more scary thing for me was the fact that I had to be the leader of 150 plus employees throughout the summer. And like, that's something that I had done on a small scale, but I had never done it on that big of a scale.
Yeah.
So going into it that way was definitely like nerve wracking, and I had to like research into, and whether that was calling you, I'm sure that I called you a million times before the season even started, because I wanted everything to go perfect. And like, one of the first things you told me was like, it's not going to, like, it won't go perfect, and that's okay. Yeah. Like, but I would call you, I would call Gabby, I would call, for those of you who don't know, Gabby is the other director,
that's our boss
in DFW. Yeah. But yeah, I would call her. And the phone is open within this entire company, so I could have called, the owners. I could have called anybody that I wanted to. to get research and to get more idea of what I'm kind of walking into. Now, those calls didn't result in them giving me the blueprint.
Mhm.
Like I didn't like calling you. You didn't say, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z, and you need to do it at these times, and you need to do it here, here, here. Like it wasn't all planned, but you gave me knowledge that I could use for myself, that made me like way more comfortable. That ended up, having a good impact on like my success as a supervisor. But even after I say that because even after the research like process, it's like you're still gonna have doubts. Like it's not going to just become clear as day right after that. You still have to hit a wall. Like you still have to like push through that wall and just like continuously improve myself. And I think that if you actually took how I was first weekend when my pools were open and you compare it to like the last weekend before we went weekends
Yeah.
only, I mean it's like almost two
So
different
night and
people,
day.
right? And like yeah, it's so night and day. And like I don't say that to like toot my own horn, right? I'm just saying like the process of learning and going through that helped me. And I know that, in the future, like whatever job I'm doing, it's like I know that I have this work ethic installed in me because I had to go through all the hard work at the beginning of the
Yeah,
summer,
exactly.
so it kind of like I was able to take values from this job into my life in whatever I do. So it's kind of like the beauty in the process for me. It's like looking back on it now. It's easy to look back on it now because I'm like, I'm not in it right now. I don't have any pools open right now. So it's like
But honestly, in
I can
itself,
look back on
like
it and laugh, right?
that's the goal, right? Like the whole idea is we're so fearful of where you would have been right now, right? Like that's a thing. In April, you probably didn't think that you would be this confident, right? You probably
Here.
didn't think you were going to
Yeah.
learn this
Yeah.
much, but you did.
Yeah.
And that's like the idea that we're trying to say is if you didn't do this, I mean, you'd be fine. You just wouldn't know what you could handle. You wouldn't know how
Yeah.
much you can grow. And this really showed you. And I liked what you said before. You did research with the intent to try and be perfect. And I did shoot you down on that. I was like, you're not going to get it perfect,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean you can't try to be perfect. And
Right.
I think that's where like probably the miscommunication, that's probably not the best word for it. Maybe the misinterpretation is we want to do perfect so bad that if we're not perfect, we didn't succeed. But you can have the intent of being perfect. You just have to understand that even if it's not perfect, that doesn't mean anyone's looking differently at you. You know, I always say this, like it's your mistakes don't define you. How you react after them do. And so whatever
Yeah.
mistake you make could be the craziest mistake in the world, could be the worst mistake you ever made. But do you take ownership in it and do you push forward and try to make sure that doesn't happen again, or do you quit? I mean, it's really that. That's to
Yeah.
me is what I want to get. That's how I see people. I don't see them for mistakes. I don't hold grudges. I don't do this. All I see is how are you after that mistake? Do you fight tooth and nail to make sure it never happens again? Do you seek information, understanding, conversations to be away from that mistake? Right? Does it
Do you
hurt
care?
you? Yeah. Does
Yeah.
it hurt you that you made that mistake to begin with?
Yeah.
And if that's it, I don't
Yeah.
judge. I don't care. That to me is the strength of a bigger person than someone who says, I'm not worthy. I'm turning my back. Because now you basically created a wall for yourself and you can never expand. I wouldn't say never, but it's going to be a lot harder for you to come back and try to expand on that because now the trust is actually broken. The mistake did not break the trust. The turning in the back,
Yeah.
the quitting, that's what broke the trust. And so I love that you did try to seek to be perfect, but you did accept maybe it's okay if I'm not perfect, but I'm going to try every day. And when I fail, you take ownership, you push forward, you make sure not to make the mistake again. And that is the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in this research, the more research you do, the less likely you're going to make these crazy kind of mistakes, crazy failures. So,
Right.
and Blake mentioned this one time. I love when he said this. So we teach a leadership course in our LGI course. So you'll get to see it coming here soon. But we teach what it means to be kind of courageous. Like, how can you be a courageous person? Because a lot of people think courage is being fearless, but fearless is not courage in my mind. That's, you are fearless and that's great, but that's not courage. Because to have courage, you have to know that the odds are stacked against you and still push through. So you have to actually be fearful and then make the decision to do it anyway. That's what true courage is, oh my God, like, I'm going into a burning building. That's probably not going to work out well for me, but
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. But the part two of how the difference really between fearlessness and courage is, courage, I'm going to prepare. The more prepared I am, really, the more courageous I can be. So if I just go in
Yeah.
blind with myself to go into that fire and, I don't know, let's save a dog, right? It's a courageous act. But if I went bare nothing, I'm not going to feel super
It's
great
dumb.
about that. And honestly, some people may call that
Yeah.
like fearless and foolhardy, right? But
Yeah.
if I'm like, okay, I got this fireproof blanket, maybe I have this mask, you know, I'm a little bit more prepared to go into that.
Got a
Yeah.
team
Probably
outside.
not a mask.
Yeah.
Who's gonna have
Yeah.
like an oxygen mask? If I have like a wet towel, right? Wet towel will cover my mouth and a
Yeah.
blanket, then at least I thought about it. I took some action. It's not going to eliminate me from getting fully burned, but maybe less burned than if I went nothing in, right? It's going to give me more time,
Yeah.
and it brings intelligence into the action. So that I always love when Blake would talk about that, is, it's the more prepared you are, the more likely you are to be courageous and do whatever you're trying to do. And so in this research phase, that's what you're doing. What do I need to run into this fire building to save this dog? And how do I do it to the best of my ability? Now, do you know how to breathe properly? Do you know how to keep your breath under control? Do you have the full proper uniform? No, we're not a firefighter, right? This is me making a last ditch effort, right? But at the same time, one could say that firefighters are the most prepared to handle these situations. And guess what? Firefighters weren't born to be into firefighters, right? They started going to school for it. They started practicing. They started doing it. And then they become firefighters, right? And even then, there's a huge difference between a 1 month firefighter and a 10-year firefighter, right? And it's just
Right.
about pushing that growth. And when you research, you are going to progress a lot more comfortably than if you just go in blind. And it's not to say you can't go in blind. You want to go in blind, go in blind. But you're going to be, I can for sure state, you're going to be a lot less likely to finish through, because it's either more or
Yeah.
less than what you expected. And if it's more, you're overwhelmed. If it's less, it's too easy. And maybe that's not what you were looking for.
Yeah. And I think that, like, it's possible to be like, it's courageous to accept that you're wrong, or to accept that you're overwhelmed,
Absolutely.
or to accept, a multitude of things. I mean, this past summer, like, I think that one of the areas that I could have done a better job in was, like, telling people when I was
Yeah.
overwhelmed, or like telling, and that maybe that's you, maybe that was Gabby, maybe that was, the lead managers underneath me. Like, I probably should have done a better job of saying that, and like coming out with that, because the only person that I was hurting in the process of not telling that, there were two people that got hurt in the process of that, and that was me and the
Yeah.
company. Because it's like, there was, like, I was just putting it all on myself, and I lost like I don't know, like free time or whatever you want to call it, right? Like I had to like put in the overtime to like uh kind of get back to the finish
Yeah.
line. And then on the other side, it's like the company as a whole, right? For them to be successful, like we had to have like the chain of command, and it needed to work that way. So I think that one area that I'm going to improve, I'm glad you brought it up, is because like next summer, like I think this is going to sound like I'm being like, I'm not doing any work. Like I'm just going to push to everybody. But no, yeah, like I will be more like obviously more open to be honest with people and like tell people how I'm feeling. Tell people now there's a line to that you don't cross, obviously.
Mm.
But I just think that there is some element to being courageous that is like acknowledging the fact that you're not where you want to be, or you're not you know performing at your best, or anything like that. And I think that a good thing to kind of put in y'all's heads is like there is I can't remember what the website is called. I think it's called Mastery. I'm not sure, but it's like if you want to master a craft, a hobby,
Mm.
something, they always say you have to do 10,000
Yeah.
hours in it.
Yeah.
um, and there's like this website that you can, it's basically like a Patreon, and you can like pay for people's classes um, in that hobby. And it's like it really shows you, because it's like 10,000 hours. You think about that face value, you're like, okay, that's a lot, but it's not like it's not anything. I don't have the calculations right next to me, but like that is a long time. You could be working on that thing for every single hour. You could not sleep for months, and you still wouldn't hit 10,000 hours. Um, but there's a reason that it's like to master something, you have to have that many hours, is because it takes time in whatever you're doing, whether it's something like as small as, you know, I can't think of any examples, but like something small or something large, like playing a guitar,
Yeah. I think it's a good
like
example.
playing a guitar. If you Yeah, like if you're trying to learn that from scratch, if I tried to pick up a guitar and learn it, I mean, it would take me 2 weeks to even play like two
Yeah.
strums,
And you
you
can't even put
know?
them together. You
So
can
it's
just
like
play
we
the one
can,
strum and the one the other.
yeah, exactly. It's like, I can't play them one right after another. Um, so I think that it's like, that's a good kind of idea to have when it comes to like improving yourself. Cause it's like, it just takes time. Um, and y'all will, you'll see when you get to your, uh, whether it's this job or whether it's your next job, or you get to college and you're doing that, you're gonna see these walls kind of come up, um, and the only person that's going to be able to like improve yourself is you. Nobody's going to kind of like sit around here and do it for you. You know.
Exactly. And I'm going to sidebar a little bit because you mentioned you know, the one thing into trying to be courageous is trying to explain like your emotions and how you're feeling. And that truly is like a courageous act. I don't think people truly understand that concept right there, right? Because everyone determines strong, I'm going to use quotes on this, strong as I am emotionally unaffected by everything around me. But truth be
Right.
told, it is so much easier to block everyone out and kind of push through than to admit, especially to someone else, I am not good. And if anyone doesn't believe me, then the next time you're having a bad day, tell someone I'm not doing good and just try to get those words out. And then the next
Yeah.
time you're feeling good, just be like, I'm fine, and see how easy it is to get those words out. And you will see there is a huge difference within that. And that was me for a very, very long time. I always was just like, block out the world. That's just how I kind of saw
I'm
the issue. Yeah,
good. Yeah,
it's
I'll do
fine.
it. Yeah.
Cry in a shower,
Yeah.
cry in a car like a real adult. That was it. But man, like just to even my wife, right? Like lifelong partner, love more than death. And I remember like the first time I was just like, I'm not doing okay. And the only reason that I really tried not to was because like I was supposed to be strength for her, right? Because a relationship is two people supporting each other. But what I really wasn't thinking about in that concept was that it's two people supporting each other. And I don't always have to be support. Sometimes you
Yeah.
need the other person to support you. And I feel like this is all relationships, friendships, whatever. We're all here to support each other. You don't have to be the central beam that keeps your friend group alive, right? Everyone is essentially just kind of taking turns and to get you through trying to do something new, or like I said, kind of a sidebar on this topic, little side topic. You are going to be better off telling people you're not good. And maybe a lot of people, I know for this, like I always felt like people were gonna judge me, right? Think I was weak or whatever. And or just not see me again for me wanting to be a strong person. People wouldn't see that strength, right? But there really is true
Mhm.
strength within that, just to even communicate those emotions and how you're feeling. But what you'll see from the other end of the spectrum is, and to me, it's always crazy. It's like you hear them stop everything that they do, and all of a sudden, all that focus goes to you. And now it's like, how do you want to talk about this? Do you want to talk about this? Is it just a hug? Like sometimes it leads to a deep conversation. Sometimes it's, I'm
Dude,
here for
a
you.
hug, a hug goes a
A hug?
long
Yeah,
way.
dude.
A hug, a hug at the end of a long day will like solve
Yeah.
everything, man. It's just like I don't know. Yeah, I've struggled with that too, man. I mean, I think that in my like eyes, it's kind of like I get to that point and I'm like, well, I don't want to burden somebody
Yeah.
else, right? Like, and you said it like with your wife, like it's like you one of your main reasons for probably not wanting to come forward with that you're struggling or like that you need help is like you didn't want to put more on her
Yeah.
plate. um, and it's like if you're in a good relationship, in my opinion, whether it's like friendly or
Yeah.
whatever, like husband and wife, I think that in a working relationship, in a good relationship like that, it's like those are the moments that like you look for because you want to help that other person. If you're with that other person for the rest of your life, or you know for the time being, whatever, long term, it's like you want to be able to help that
Mhm.
person. And you coming forward and saying that you were struggling, like you didn't see it in the short run, but in the long run it's like you were actually helping, like you're helping
Yeah.
yourself and you're helping her, because it's like now you guys probably have an even more, like even better relationship, or like even like more trusting relationship, because it's like, okay, I opened up to her and it made me feel way better,
Exactly.
or like I opened up to her and she really helped me, so it's like, wow, I saw a side to her that I didn't even know was there because I wasn't letting her in,
Exactly. And a lot of that I
you
think
know
is like trust
so
too. Like
yeah.
obviously I trust my wife, and that's at this point I think the example is not as good because if I'm going to trust anyone, it's probably going to be my wife. And I feel like a lot of people they're like,
Right.
"Well, I don't have a wife, Parker. Like I'm not married. I'm 17 years old, like or whatever, like
Yeah.
I don't have that."
Sorry, it can you can find this in like in your
Mm,
friends. This could even be your mom, your brother, your sister, your dad, like this can be whoever is like in your close circle. Like confide in those people. I think that's like the point that we're trying to get
yeah.
across.
And just start with something small, right? Do I need to tell a person I met 2 weeks ago the deepest, darkest skeleton that I have? No. But
No. Yeah.
maybe I can just be like, man, that exam sucked. And I can just talk about how, like, I didn't feel like I was prepared for the exam. Like, you're like, oh, like, let's really talk about that deepness of that exam. No, they're gonna be like, yeah, dude, that sucked too. Or, hey,
Yeah, that
I
sucked.
actually felt pretty good. You want me to help you? Like, start with something small. Like, and the
Yeah.
only way for a relationship to truly develop is you have to give these vulnerabilities of weakness, in my mind. You are basically trusting someone to accept and either help or at minimum accept that weakness. And so it's really hard to do long, deep, but it's really easy to do with a basic thing like that exam. And you start with that. And then maybe next time you just talk about a bad day. I woke up late and this exam killed me. Uh, my workout couldn't even do it. And they're like, do you want to work out, buddy? You start to see like they're always trying to help or they're always trying to listen.
Yeah.
And that relationship turns into something. And that's, you have one in a relationship, which is I just really like this person. I like hanging out with them. I like spending time with them. But the true knit and grit to me comes from the acceptance, the willingness of vulnerability, the acceptance of that vulnerability, and the lack of judgment of that vulnerability. And really, that's when you get to nitty gritty. All my deep relationships that I have with the people around me have come not just from the great times, and I've had great times with a lot of my friends, but has come from I'm weak and I need help, and they'll help me in big ways, small ways, ways they didn't even know. But it just had to come with me just willing to give a little bit and just step by step by
Yeah.
step. So
Yeah.
little sidebar, but I think that's really pivotal to understand because I really think that's what's going to get you through these steps is you have to be vulnerable knowing you're not going to be perfect, that you're actually going to be way more weak than you are going to be strong within these whatever you're trying to do, whatever this new thing is you're trying to do. um, but there you have a support group out there. Even if they don't know anything about it, you still have a support group. They can just listen. They can give advice, even if they have no experience, or if they have all the experience, they can give you advice. This can be a part of your research. That's great.
Yeah. And I think that this is like very tiny sidebar, but like in your life, you're going to meet friends, you're going to meet
Mhm.
people that like when they first come into your life, it's like, okay, they're friends, like, we're all close, but you'll probably figure out after a while that not all of those friends are true friends.
Yes,
Right. And like the people who want to help you with this stuff or like want to, you know, um, yeah, give you help in any way. Like if you reach out to them and you're like giving up a, piece of your vulnerability, if they take that and they like actually try to help you, those are true friends. Like those are friends that you want to stick
yeah,
around. And I think this is an organic way to like kind of filter that out and like figure out who your real friends are, figure out who your inner circle needs to be for you to have, your best life. Um, because I mean, it's happened to me. I mean, I've had friends before that like it took like, a certain thing to happen where it's like, okay, do I really like, is this person really worth, you know, having around in my life if they can't do this for me,
yeah,
right? Like if they can't, you know, so I think that's just a very organic way to kind of, yeah, like figure out your circle and kind of like figure out the people that are actually have your best interest in mind. Because if you have their best interest in mind, why should they not have yours? You know?
exactly.
So I think that's yeah,
And I
I
always
think that's
I
a good
always
point.
say friends are someone you enjoy their time with at your best. Real friends accept you and are still your friend at your worst. And
Yeah.
it just makes it real
Yeah. It's a good
simple.
way of putting it.
You know, if someone accepts you at your best, well, that's easy. You're at your best. Everyone loves people at their best. But to be at their worst, when they're super negative, super sad, super mopey, a lot of people are like, you're bringing my vibe down, dude. Like, I don't want to deal with that. Well, I mean, who gets to choose? Life happens.
Yeah.
Life
No.
throws terrible things at
Like,
you.
dude, this is how my brain is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those true friends, like, they'll stick around. And I mean, you could be in a rut for years at a time. And uh, to be able to have people that are there for you, and maybe you don't make a lot of progress right away, but are there through thick and thin to push through that, that's a really good friend. And I think we could definitely, maybe we could probably make a whole episode of this because at some point you will have to learn, like you said, when do you let go? Like, is someone that's going through a rut and that's why they're not caring about my vulnerability, my issues? or do they just not care? And I think we can do a pretty good job of maybe explaining that difference, because I have had to let people go and it's really, really hard, but it was in the best interest. And I think the short term answer, people just like want some kind of basic answer now, is if you've done everything you can to help them grow and be successful, and they don't do the same for you, that's kind of the line, right? Or if they
Yeah.
continue to push you into the wrong direction and you start to see
Right.
that, then next step would be to have a conversation to say, hey, I don't really like this direction that we're going to. And if they say, too bad, this is how we roll, then we separate. But a lot of times they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I just thought that's where our connection was. And if they respect that and they back off, and you can maintain a friendship there, then keep that friendship. You know where that friendship
Yeah.
is. So that's like the short answer that I could kind of come up with. And like I said, Tanner, I think you and I can have a great, huge breakdown of that, and building relationships with people, how to make them stronger, um, how to kind of build. I always call them my people, right? But how to build that inner circle, knowing that there's different layers of friendship. Some are more acquaintances, some are more you hang
Mhm.
out with for a day or so, and then you got the true OGs, the true homies, and how that goes about. So we'll definitely bring that up on an episode if that seems interesting to you guys, where you would like to hear that sooner rather than later. Just let us know, and we can. We have a playlist, and I think we have 15 or so already set up. But if there's stuff you ever want to hear about, just a little sidebar, just recommend it to us, and we'll bring it up for you guys. But let's go back. And this is always going to happen.
Yeah. We
Anyone
keep
listening to
tangenting.
us, we're always going to
Yeah.
tangent, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we just have so much we want to give, and we want to give it and provide it to you, and it's relation. I mean, it's a tangent, yes, but it's a good tangent. But we will go back to step two. Step two. So I called this the pre-learn slash study. I guess I could just call it learning. The reason why I call it pre-learning is, if I'm trying something new, I'm going to go somewhere to learn it. So this is like the pre-learn. Again, it's kind of in the self-research, but it's very specific. And so for the podcast, I'm going to go with the podcast. I knew that the microphone was the most important, and I knew the camera was good. If I was going to do video, like, the camera was going to be fairly important. And I knew the software, the software, and like, we're using OBS right now. We're podcasting off Squadcast, whatever. I knew that these were the best things, or excuse me, the best things. And so then I researched best microphone for podcasting. Right? What's the best cheap one? What's the best mid-range one? What's the best super fancy one? And why did they make what are the qualities of a cheap one, a moderate one, and a premium one? And so I did all the research and these things, and it brought up the microphone that I use, and it was the one, and it was a mid-range one. They said there's definitely better out there, but if you're especially focused on podcasting, this was a great one to start. A lot of people use it. Very easy to use. Plug it in. That's it. So, but that was it.
Yeah.
And then I figured out some softwares to use. But then I had to learn how to use them, and that took maybe about a week or so trying to figure out how to use them. We even had sound issues before we were trying this, trying to, like, I can't hear you. I can't get the
Yeah.
camera to work.
Literally today.
Yeah. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, it's always going to be like that. But that's why you set up this pre-learning thing. And I think I kind of jumped actually to step three, but so I'll back up a little bit, but learn as much as you can, as best you can the internet is a powerful thing, right? And so I learned
Mhm.
how to basically set up an EQ. I know that a compressor, if I scream, it's going to bring that down, right? I know the limiter is going to, I think it's limiter. I'm over here probably using the wrong vocab as I go throughout this, but
Yeah. Some people are just screaming at
yeah,
you.
but I've learned the basics of the sound and how it works. I know like there's like my mixer right now, it's showing green, and then there's like a little yellow section and then red. And they said yellow is where it needs to be. So I'm actually a little OCD because I'm like a little bit in the red for some words. And like, oh no, this is wrong. But I just kind of have to accept it and let it be. But I know now that this is where my voice needs to be. And I know that red, while is right on the line, it's not terrible. I do need to adjust it for future podcast, right? But if I didn't know that, I would think that red, well, actually, probably wouldn't think that was red, was because red usually equals bad. But I would think the green probably would be best, and that would actually be too quiet, right? So I learned the basic vocab, the basic works of how these things, and I am by no means a master. And I bet if I went to like an
Yeah.
audio tech, he'd be like, WTF, what is this? Like, you have
Yeah.
a basic understanding, right? But here's how to make it 12 billion times better. And that's the point,
Yeah.
right? Our goal is to get to a point where can we be moderately self-sufficient? And then can we use the master of that to make it far better? So going into this, Tanner, like, so you, on your side of things, we're going to be a supervisor. You asked the basic questions, and then you started to figure out what you specifically needed to work on, right? And so, just on your
Yeah.
perspective, like what were those key elements that you needed to kind of focus on to be an improved supervisor? And then, how did you further your research within that?
Yeah. So I had learned very quickly on that it was a lot of clerical work. There's a lot of on the computer, making the schedule, timesheets. And these are all stuff that, I mean, you'll say it too. Like, it's not hard to do alone. It's not hard. But when it gets difficult is when it piles up with all these other things and you procrastinate it. And like for me, when I was in high school, I was an A1 procrastinator. Like, I waited until the last day to turn things in. And then college came by and like just kicked me in the butt.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Right. And it was really like the last like 3 years of college. My first year of college, I was the same exact way. Like, I was just like going through the motions basically. And like somehow I was getting good grades. But then I went to a university and finally I was like, okay, this can't work. But I got to, I get to this job and I'm like, okay, I cannot procrastinate this because I would think like there's a deadline that I got to hit, and it's like I'm gonna hit that deadline like regardless, right? Whether that means that I don't sleep the night before, what it just has to take because I'm going to hit that deadline. I'm not going to miss that deadline. But is that a good way to go about life? Being like, okay, that's my plan. I'm going to wait until the night before and not sleep. Like, that's not a good way to
No.
go about it. So I had to kind of make time for myself, actually, physically think out time that I could do it in my week, that I could like complete that. And those hours were dedicated strictly just to scheduling or strictly just to timesheets. And it's like kind of learning that I needed to physically divide my time because all the other jobs that I had previously had were you go there, you clock in, you got work to
Yeah.
do,
You just do it.
and it's, yeah, and you just do it. And it's like, it's more or less the same thing here, except it's like everything's happening at once. So you have to actually divide that time because nobody's going to do it for me. It's just like I have things that I have to accomplish and I gotta meet those deadlines. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. That was like the next step for me was like learning that I had to separate all this out. And I sucked at it. I mean, I use the example of being like, well, like I use the example of being like, okay, I'm just gonna not sleep one night. Like I think there were a few weeks where I actually did that
Yeah.
because it was like I wanted to, I don't know, maybe I was out at a site for a little bit too long, and then I get home at 10:30 and then I got to shower, be up at 7 in the morning, but I have this entire schedule to publish for a week. And it's like when I first started, it was
Yep.
terrible. But then by the time I got like probably midway through the summer, it was like, okay, Wednesday was the midway point to the deadline because the deadline it was Monday, right? think it was Monday. Yeah.
So it was like Monday one year and it was Wednesday another year. So, but yeah, there was a day that you had a deadline for. We'll say Monday.
Yeah.
Let's just say Monday.
Let's say it was Monday. I would be like, okay, Wednesday, I need to have it not necessarily published, but I need to have it made.
Yeah.
And I need to have all the rough draft of the schedule made. And then on Friday would be my day to check it. I would look at it. I would, take into account all the availability. I would look at everything, anything that anybody has told me throughout the week. Maybe somebody was like, hey, I know I said I was available on this day, but I can't work it. So I would take all those into account, and I would finally publish it on Friday. And then the weekend was either just doing stuff like out, in person,
Mhm.
or kind of just fine tuning that schedule. So I found that schedule for me that I implemented for myself worked. And that can be attributed to, any other field, right? It's like I got a task that I knew I had to do, but I didn't know how to do it. I talked to you guys. You guys told me what worked for you. You told me like what typically has worked in the past, and I took those ideas into my own head and built out a plan like for myself that I failed at first. I want you guys to know that I failed at first, but I'd say at the end of the summer it was like successful. Like I had a timeline down, and my week wasn't nearly as crazy as it was at the beginning of the summer.
Exactly. So,
So
yeah, I mean, you basically saw building routine. That was it. That was the main.
yeah,
That I know I need to focus on this. You were starting to kind of see that, and so you advance yourself into building a routine. And then I remember it was you will see. I understand. I keep saying like it's research and then it's pre-learn, and it feels like the same thing. But I want you guys to picture research as the vague. What is the overall thing that I need to get? Right. And
what is
as
it?
we go
Yeah,
into the pre-learn slash study, that is what is still confusing and what are the more detailed specifics that I need to know. And that's what you did.
yeah,
So this is what it was you got from your research that this is a very quantitative job. There's a lot of different things. None of it's hard, but there's a lot of it. 100 different things, right? Lifeguards have to think about themselves. Managers have to think about the lifeguards. Lead managers have to think about the managers and the lifeguards. Supervisors have to think about the lead managers, the managers, and lifeguards, right? The exponential
hmm
growth of that is huge. And that's when you started to see I'm not going to be able to do this like I would a manager because that is still a to the day thing and an in the moment thing. And supervisor breaks
yeah,
into the futuristic thing. Like if we do our job well, the next 2 weeks are good. Like you won't feel the effects of our job until maybe about 2 weeks from now, right? So if
right,
you if it's kind of chaos for like a week or two, then that's because 2 weeks prior we messed up, right? We didn't hit the mark,
yeah,
and so if it just feels like everything's going well and everything smoothly, well, that's because of everything that we did. But it's solely done through a strong routine, which is what you notice. And so then you started asking, hey, what is your routine? Or how do I even build a routine? Like, what's even the focus? Because I think
what
originally the
even is a
focus was
routine?
the business sides,
Yeah,
learning lifeguard, and all that stuff. And that
yeah,
wasn't really the focus that it needed to be. The focus was the routine, right? And so then you were able to expand on that. And once you got that routine down, well, then crazy enough, then you could spend more time learning lifeguards, the skills, learning lifeguards, the people, learning the
yeah,
pools. And so it allows you, I think this pre-learn study, it allows you to see what the true focus is so that you can do the rest. What do you need to work on so that you can be even better? Because you really should focus on the weakness here, and then that'll help everything fall into play. So
yeah,
that was good. And then you really kind of transitioned well into the self test, right? So you asked about the routine. How do you maximize that? How do you make sure you do it? You talked about your concerns, pros and cons, and then you implement it, right? Because probably the
Mhm.
first routine that you built for yourself either was weird or it didn't quite fit. And I think what people understand is when you're trying new things within new things as well. Your new thing was supervising
Yeah.
in the beginning. And now this new thing is how do I build a routine, which is in itself was a new thing. So you had to learn how to build a routine. You had to study the practices of that, and then you had to implement them. Right. So now Brenton kind of
Yeah.
self test phase here where you try it and you take time to reflect on it and see what that looks like. And did it work? Did it not? Why did it work? And why did it not work? And you should view both ends of the spectrum here. You need to be able to understand and reflect why did it work without blaming yourself. You can't just blame ignorance. You can't just blame, well, I didn't want to do this in the first place. Like you
Right.
truly have to
That's a
see,
cop out.
yeah,
Yeah.
why did this not work? Yes, maybe I did something that caused it not to work, but all I'm saying is don't say, well, that's just how I am. Like I'm a procrastinator. That's how I'm going to be because you are a procrastinator, but you didn't let that be who you were. And once you build that
Yeah.
routine, then when you really truly dove into that, that helped. And maybe even you set this up. This is how I do it because I'm a procrastinator too. That is my life. And so I basically use the routine to force procrastination into a
Mhm.
future due date, right? So when I set due dates for myself, it is almost a I feel like I'm gonna set people up for a lot of failure here. I don't want people to practice a routine as this method, but it does work for me and it could work for you. But I think at the leadership level, you need to know when the final due date is and you need to set the procrastination due date beforehand. So let's say my due date, like my boss says due date's Wednesday. Well, I'm not due dating myself to Wednesday to do that project. I'm going to do it Monday. But my
Yeah.
deadline is I have to have it done Monday. Now, what that means for me and how my brain works is I'm not starting it till Monday. Definitely going to finish it on Monday. And worst comes to worst, I have Tuesday, like I have a buffer. And so for those that procrastinate, this is the way that you do it. You want to, if your due date's Wednesday, let's keep going with this example. Set the due date for Monday, for instance, whatever day works for you, but I'm going to do Monday for this example. That should apply the pressure to get it done. And then something happens,
Yeah.
especially with lifeguarding, EAP can happen, AD pads decide to be expired, oxygen completely gone, whatever,
Poop.
whatever it may be.
Poop in the
You
pool.
have a buffer and
Yeah.
like, okay, now I need to do it Tuesday. And because I have the procrastinative mindset, that's even more pressure to get it done Tuesday because
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to wait till Wednesday. Right. So this is a way, if you're a procrastinator, this is just kind of a tip of the trick. I don't think it works for everybody. I think truly it is planning and doing it, but maybe this is a different perspective that you can do. Really, I think it's about building a routine, doing, like you said, Tanner, you did this on Monday, this on Tuesday. You try to get most of your computer work done by Thursday or Friday. So that
Mhm.
Saturday, Sunday, it was you out there, like seeing the people, being ready for the chaos because weekends are far more chaotic in the lifeguard world than any other days other than the holidays.
Right.
So that's how you set yourself up for it. And that is really what we're trying to get through with here in that perspective. And it will be another podcast in general to focus on the routine and the disciplines of maintaining routine and why it's so beneficial and why so many upper level people, CEOs, directors, like entrepreneurs, it's the routine that keeps them successful. It's
Yeah.
really not even their knowledge at that point. It's, people own numerous businesses. How do they do it all? Because they are very routine and very systematic. Not that there aren't highly successful people that literally wing it every day. It's just,
They got
yeah,
lucky.
and
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
lucky. It's just, that's such a small percentage. And you
Yeah.
never want to shoot for a small percentage of success. You always want to say is what can I do to be 80% successful. Maybe not 100% successful, but like 80% successful. And this is what this podcast is for, is I want to try a new thing. How can I get 70, 80% successful to stick with it, or to say I gave it everything that I did and it just was or was not for me, right? So this is the test. This is the steps. So going to
Right.
step 4, this to me is probably the most crucial, which was find a community specifically for you to advance you in whatever you're trying. And with the podcast, that was you. Because like I said, I tried to start a podcast last year, but I knew I wanted to do it with someone. Like I wanted to talk to someone and I needed someone that could talk with me. The conversations could be real, not forced or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got to work with you last year that you were kind of that person, right? We just have like a natural, and I know there's like a bromance going on. And I'm sure if Gabby's listening to this, she's probably saying, making fun of us. But we
She's
just
like, yep.
have that connection. Like it hit right off the bat that we can, and we're like 100% different people. I'm short, you're extremely tall. Like you love basketball. It's like the one sport I can never pick up. You're super like sports minded. I'm not. I like Jiu Jitsu, and I like just kind of being there, but I don't, the statistics and it'll all over my head, right? So we think very differently, and we have similarities, right? Like we still love sports. You can just definitely, you could probably start your own podcast on sports, and I definitely could not, right?
Oh, dude, yeah.
And we have similar interests and things like that, but you just have I think they call it synergy with people, and I think that synergy is very crucial to look for and find, because that's what's going to get you going when you don't want to go, right? If I didn't like doing a podcast with you, we would only be good until we weren't. And then it would just be like podcast over, like we're done,
Yeah.
And
done forever.
So this to me is really crucial, and I'm going to not tangent, but we've been using the podcast and we've been using you as a supervisor. But I'm going to use jiu-jitsu, as I can't not throw in at least one jiu-jitsu reference, because I just love it as much as I do. You're right. So let me get it out, guys, and let me deal with it. But when I was looking to get into jiu-jitsu and I did my research, I called Charles, I called Blake. They were the only one. And I think I even called Kevin. I think I called all of them because they all did jiu-jitsu at the time. They were about a year or two ahead of me. And I was trying to figure out how to find a gym, because I did a very little bit in high school, but nothing crazy, right? And so I really wanted to delve into it. And pretty much the same advice was given, which was find a place that you like, the jiu-jitsu will come. So I just pretty much had to figure out what I was looking for. And I wanted jiu-jitsu to be good, right? Like I wanted a good instructor. I didn't want like a bad instructor, but I really was just looking for people that were willing to help me, the instructor to help me. And I was definitely looking for what I always call like our barefoot community. Like they just want to spend time with you, and they want to enjoy your company, which means I wasn't looking for an incredibly competitive jiu-jitsu school, right? Where they're just focused on competition, how to win competition. I just wanted to learn all the positions, not what's going to help me in competition, because competitive jiu-jitsu and I guess hobbyist jiu-jitsu is very different. And so first school I went to, I got introduced. They gave me the tour. They said they were heavily competitive. I was like, dang, or strike one number one, but not the end of the world. I go then. Mats are huge. There's a good amount of people, a few white belts that I got to work with. But the instructor, it's almost as if like she didn't even want to be there. She like showed me some of the drills, went through it, and she was like, cool, like thumbs up, and went on. But when we got to rolling at the end, or when she was teaching, it was just dead. Like, here's how you do it, the end. And we got to the rolls. She was literally just on her phone, like just scrolling, like no participation whatsoever. And I was like, all right, this is not it.
She had no
Yeah,
passion.
it's just
Yeah.
like she's just there to be there, and that was it. So I ixnayed that, and found another school. I go to that school, and they're very proper, super formal, but the instructor super nice. Like showed me how to tie my belt. Didn't even know how to tie my belt at the time, but he showed me how to tie my belt. Goes, anytime you need help, like just let me know. Don't worry about it. This happens to everybody.
Is it just like a tie?
No,
Is it just like a
it's
tie?
the way that I learned. And so this is when I went to my third school. So I went to that school. With the people were great, but just a money issue. So I popped out. So then I went to the third school, which was Gracie, Jim, and Richardson. Love it, or loved it, because I'm now at a different school because I moved. Um, but it is the way that I learned, because I wanted to be good and I didn't want to look like a fool. So I did my my research, my pre-research. So I had this like YouTube video of this belt. And the reason why I chose this belt is because they said it will pretty much never come untied. I was like, perfect. If I can do this belt
Yeah.
before class, I don't have to worry about it the rest of class, and I can just
Yeah.
practice. So I would be in like the changing room for like, I would get there really early, like 20 minutes early, to like make sure I can watch this video and do all the steps, because it is super complicated. There are easy ways to tie a belt. I just didn't want to like not. So I did
Have
this
to do it
crazy
again.
belt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it never came off. That allowed me to do it. It's the only way I pretty much know how to tie a belt now. Um,
That's funny.
but I guess that's a great. I went into my third school, and that was with it. That was, they just wanted, they love jiu-jitsu. The owner of the gym, just, I mean, he could not talk enough, man. Like he would just talk to you, like he was super friendly. He loved jiu-jitsu. You could see the passion. The other instructor, super super nice, super great, like high level stuff. And I was there for a really long time. I say a long time, like a year and a half, 2 years. um but then I was like, okay, this is my spot, and this is where I wanted to be. And that made it easier to go back the next day, because now it wasn't like, oh God, like I had to try and learn. This person doesn't care. Like that's where I knew that they wanted me there. And I knew that everyone there loved jujitsu. And that's what I wanted for me. Right. So there was my community. And now it became a, can I go the next day, or can I find the drive to go the next day, to I gotta go. Like it was like urging to go, and it built that passion within myself. And there were times where I didn't want to
Yeah.
go, and we had a group text, and they were like, hey Parker, where are you at? I was like, dang it, all right, I'll be back the next day, guys. Like you almost don't want to let them
Yeah.
down by not going. And so that to me is the community that I was looking for, and that's what's kept me in jiu-jitsu for as long as, and I'm coming up 4 years in May, right? And I think that was probably
Wow.
one of the most pivotal things that I did. Like if I hadn't found the community, if I had just based jujitsu off of that first place and then quit after that, I never would have seen the jujitsu community the way that I see it now. And so
Mm.
back, let's go back. For you, where's what was the community? And it's kind of hard to explain the community, but I guess what community did you like thrive to look for, I guess, within Barefoot, or maybe Barefoot was the community, but what were you looking for? How did that help you push through?
Yeah. I mean, I think that my so I had work basically worked everywhere. I mean, like any like industry that you can think of that's like an entry level job. Like I've worked at like food, uh, restaurant, fast food, just general customer service with kids. Like I've worked everywhere.
Yeah.
And I had never, even when I was just the delivery guy, like I had never worked in a company that had the culture that we have, which is like a family culture. And it's like, it really feels like from the top to the bottom. And I hate to use that because it's like, but you see what I'm saying? Like from
Yeah.
the
All of us.
first year lifeguard to the owner of this company, like you really feel like if you're in a position of leadership, you really feel like you can talk to anybody
Mhm.
if you need it. And like that means a lot to me because it's like what you're saying with like how you skip a class and then the people will text and be like, hey, you know, where are you at? It's almost like I am more motivated to not like to reflect well on y'all.
Yeah.
I am more motivated to do good for like for the sake of just making y'all proud because it's like I know that y'all have my back and it's like y'all are motivating me to do, you know, what's best. And it's like you touched on it a little bit. It's like you almost want to in whatever you're doing, trying new things. It's like you almost ideally you're gonna like whatever you're trying,
Mhm.
right? Naturally, you're gonna like it. And it's like for me, I didn't have a necessarily like obvious love for lifeguarding or CPR. I knew that I liked people,
Yeah,
and I
and you
knew that I
even
was passionate
mentioned,
about
like,
connecting with
I'm gonna
people.
be honest, guys, lifeguarding is not my passion, but yet you
Right?
had a
Yeah.
passion even within it, and it still came out on top.
And like I say that to be like now I do kind of have a little passion for lifeguard because I realize was what it like
Right.
represents and like having the power of lifeguarding and CPR makes you a superhero. Like obviously you're not fighting people aliens from a different world, right? But like like compared to a normal human being, like you have something that they don't have,
Mhm.
so like that I am like a little bit more passionate about that now, but it was hard coming into it because I didn't have that thought about it. So naturally having the leadership that I had, like that is kind of the community that I like seeked refuge in because it's like I needed like the extra like push at the beginning of the summer to like because I'm like why would I put in this much work for like something that I don't like innately love, like some like you mentioned I like basketball, like I love basketball I could work 120 hours in a week
Mhm.
and it wouldn't even feel like work
Yep.
because it's like it's something that I love. And I realized like through that community, I found what I love. And that's like helping people, connecting with people, and like seeing them improve. Like if I had a guard who like would have failed his audit
Mhm.
and then like I tell him about it, whatever, we're talking about it, and he's like, oh, I want to get better. And I give him the tools to succeed. And in 2 weeks, we come back, we revisit, and he has like vastly improved his like skills. I mean, that's all I
Yeah.
like. That
There's
is
no
like
greater
my
feeling
one
for sure.
thing. Yeah, there's no better feeling. Like seriously. And it's like I didn't see that when I first started because I was like, I mean, selfishly, I was like, man, I don't know these
Yeah.
people, you know? But it's like as you kind of see how the company operates itself, you're like, damn, I have a position in this. Like I can make a difference,
And
you know?
imagine,
So
and I think this is it. This is the whole point of what we're talking about is right here, and you worded it perfectly. Had you not tried, had you not tried this new
yeah,
thing, had you pursued something else, you never would have realized this. You never would have experienced this. You never would have realized
yeah,
that your goal, one of your goals in life, is to help people, right? Help them be successful,
yeah.
help them grow, and be there for them. And this job is pretty much the epitome of that. Our whole goal and whole life. We are a lifeguard company, and I probably shouldn't. We are a lifeguard company, no quotes. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
mission for Barefoot is to help today's generation grow and be successful. That's the whole purpose. We
yeah.
just do it through a niche of lifeguarding. And that's where you saw it. You're like, you originally saw this as a lifeguard company, and then you saw, no, this is about growth. This is about if I
It's a family. Yeah,
if I can do this well, I can help a lot of people grow. And
yeah,
you get to see that. You get to see the best of the best be awesome. You get to see the worst, like really try and strive to be the best. And you get to be a part of that growth and you get to help them. And I don't get it a lot, but I do get it frequently where I've had people 7 years ago. I have someone I think it was about 5 years ago. I haven't worked with them for 5 years. And they were just like, thank you for showing me what it meant to be like a hard worker, because my employment life is easy. Like I see people my age or older struggling, and here I am just like doing what I was taught as a lifeguard from 15 through
Yeah.
high school. And it's just such a cool way. Like I don't do it to receive that praise. I don't want people to think I'm just like, oh, here, like, oh, give me all the praise. But
Right.
it that's what we do. Our goal is to push to that. Right. So that is our focus, that is our passion, and that's what you got to see. And had you never done that, you never would have seen that. You never would have experienced that. So amazing. And that's, again, this is why we should try new things, because this is what's going to help us identify who we are. Because we talked about a little bit last episode, and I know we're going to talk about it in a full episode, but the the topic was you need to figure out what kind of person you are, because until you figure out who you are, you can't live the life that you know you should. And this is a way for you to figure out who you are. I did not think I was going to be a jiu-jitsu like nerd. I thought it was cool, but I did not realize how much of a passion and love I would have for it. I just wanted to learn almost to a certain degree. And it wasn't until like 2 years in, I'm like, I'm going for black belt. Like I actually want to own my own gym one day. Like that's how passionate I become. And I never would have done it if I was like, well, people like break arms and legs and stuff in there. And I was like, I don't know if I want to like just willingly do that. But I did. And this is why we try new things, is because sometimes and usually what you least expect is usually the most important thing to you. Because my whole plan originally in short term was to be a lawyer, and I'm not. I think I hit the full opposite end of the spectrum from there. It just happened, but that's the way life goes. And so it's really important. You can have expectations for yourself and plans, but if they're going to go according to plan, or maybe you realize that it's not actually what you want. I never want to be a lawyer now. But I still I wanted to be a lawyer to help people. I just realized I could help people this way too. My passion was to help people, not to necessarily keep the bad guys off the street or keep the good guys on the street. So we had some difficulties, some technical difficulties. Tanner's AirPods end up dying, and so we lost pretty much on his half the last 30, 45 minutes. So we're going to actually make this a part 2. Or we're going to make the next part a part 2. We're going to end this and be a part 1. I am going to leave the update so you know what's going on in the barefoot world, but just so you're not fully thrown off, this is what happened. Again, we even talked about like we're learning. So pretty good prime example that we kind of made a mistake, but we're going to, work past it and move on. So this will be a part 1 video, and then we'll elaborate into part 2, which really talks about the final step and then some tips and tricks. So probably won't be as long, but it will kind of wrap up the series, and we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. So that'll probably be published not on the set date that we have it, but as soon as possible for you guys, just so you can feel complete with it. So I do apologize. Thank you all for being patient as we work through this and learn through it. I really do appreciate you. We're going to transition it to the closing out of what's going on in Barefoot World, and then I will see y'all next episode. So thank you very much. Appreciate y'all. So Barefoot World and what's going in there. Again, if you would like to work for us, applications are not out for lifeguarding, monitoring, and all the positionals. They're not out yet. But depending on when you're listening, podcasts or whatever, they may be out. So you just go to barefoot.net and click on our employment. We are operating in DFW and in Houston. So whichever place you like more, well, I say whatever place to live in, that's where you should apply. And then fill out the application. I believe we have shortened it a little bit. I don't remember exactly, but just fill it out. All applications are very similar to this, so don't expect if this is your first job, this is what you're going to be asked during an application. And sign up for your training, and you'll see Tanner and I there. Or if you're down in Houston, maybe you'll see me there. I might travel down, but uh, you will be welcome with open arms. We will be more than happy to have you. We'll be ecstatic to have you, get to know you, and talk to us. Get to know us. We'd love to have conversations with you, get to know you. For those that want to become instructors, applications are out as of this past Sunday. The 14th? Yeah, so they came out on the 14th, so they're live now. Please pick your class. It is first come, first serve. So once that class picks up, then it turns into a wait list, and you may or may not be accepted after that point. So, and you might have to find another training. But we have dates. Session 1 for DFW and Houston is January 27th, 28th, and February. Just want to make sure I get the right dates for everybody. February 3rd and 4th. And then session 2 is February 10th and 11th, 17th and 18th. And then session 3, I think is DFW only, March 2nd, 3rd, 9th, and 10th. And then session 4 for DFW or session 3 for Houston is March 11th through the 14th. So just some basic dates for you. Attend the course. Love to have you. This is my specialty, right? So I'll be training you. Yours truly will be training you. Tanner will be there at all the DFW ones, and then maybe I can visit some Houston ones. And last but not least, we have our tube basically almost in the process. Like, we're ready to bulk make them, So for those that have been excited about the tube, I am hoping that we have them coming, but we have finalized the tube and we have the final tube product. We actually got to bring it to an LGIT course over McKinney, and they got to use it. They all loved it. They were fighting over it because of how much easier it was to use. So I just wanted to give you updates on the tube because I knew you've been looking for it. And then last but not least, thank you all so much for listening to us. Again, cannot tell you how much Tanner and I appreciate y'all very much. You guys are what make us go around. We love you all and appreciate y'all very much. So thank you for everything that you do. Summer is right around the corner, so we're really excited to get to see you guys. If you need anything, as always, you can reach out. If you want to hear something, hear Tanner and I talk about something or tangent about something, just leave us know, leave us a comment, and y'all have a wonderful day. Love you all very much. Love you.